In this tutorial, we're going to create simple animation loops for the propeller, the wing, and the legs of our BattleBot. I'm going to start with the propeller on the back. And when you select it, you'll see the keyframes that appear for that object in your user interface timeline below. They are represented by these red lines. This is what we're going to create using the user interface timeline and then the graph editor. I'm going to make sure my channel box is available. And the first thing I need to do is identify the axes on which this propeller has to rotate. So if I was to select perhaps a different color one, you'll see that it's actually the blue axis that is perpendicular to the propeller. So that's the axis on which we will be rotating the propeller. I'm going to start by putting my playback head at the beginning of the timeline, and I'm going to go to the channel box, and I'm going to right click on Rotate Z and choose Key Selected. Now I've decided that at frame 50 I'd like it to make one complete revolution, so I'll go to 50 frames on the timeline by clicking on the 50 or using the box at the end of the timeline, which is an active text box which allows me to navigate the keyframes. And when I've done that, I'm going to go to Rotate Z again. Now you'll notice that once you've initiated the first keyframe, you'll see a red box next to Rotate Z in the channel box, and you'll see a red line in your timeline at frame 1. I'm going to select the 0 for Rotate Z, and I'll make it 360. And if I were to drag through my timeline or play my timeline, I've got one revolution that stops at 50 frames. But I'd like this to rotate for the duration of my timeline, no matter how long it might be. With the propeller selected, I'm going to go to the graph editor. Now, if you don't see the graph editor on your shelf already, you would go to Windows, and you would go to Animation Editors and Graph Editor. And in the graph editor, you'll see a line representing the two keyframes. I'll click on the word Rotate Z and then go to Curves and choose Post-Infinity Cycle. Now if I were to play my animation, it'll continue to rotate for the duration of however long my animation might be. Now we're going to animate the wings. I'm going to go to my front view, and in my front view I'm going to identify the axes on which I need to rotate these. I'll select one of the wings to start, and I'll hit E on the keyboard, and by rotating I can now look in my channel box and I can see that Z is the axis on which to rotate the wings. I'll put it back where it was, and I'm going to shift select both of them, and I'm going to choose Modify Freeze Transform, and that just zeroes out any of the functions that might have a degree set. I'm going to put the playback head at the beginning of the timeline, and I'm going to make sure that I kind of start with these two at the same angle up like this. I'll shift select both at the same time, and I'll right click on Rotate Z and choose Key Selected. You'll see a red box next to the letter Z in Rotate Z in your channel box, and in the timeline you'll see a corresponding red vertical line. I'm now going to go to frame 50, and at frame 50 I'm going to select each one and rotate them to a down position. This is all very subjective. Now, in order to complete the cycle that I can loop seamlessly, I need to copy and paste the very first keyframe for both of these wings. I'll go back to the beginning of the timeline. I'll shift select both wings. I'll shift and drag through the keyframe at frame 1. And when I do, I have a red box with a yellow line. So when your keyframe appears yellow, that means you successfully selected it. You can now right click on the red box, choose Copy, go to the frame in which you want to paste it. In this case, it will be 100. I'll right click, choose Paste, and paste. Now I've got a complete cycle for each of these wings, but it stops after frame 100. So as we did with the tail, I'm going to keep both of these elements selected, and I'm going to go to the graph editor. And in the graph editor, I'll shift select rotate Z for both wings, and then I'm going to go inside the graph editor to curves, post infinity, cycle. And if I play this now, I can see that I've got that complete rotation cycle, and it will continue to loop for as long as the animation may be. Now we'll rotate the legs. I started off with them in opposite directions. I'm going to shift select them, and then with my playback head at frame 1, I'll right click on rotate X and choose key selected. I'll go to frame 50, and then I'm going to use my side view to move them in opposite directions again. If I were to go to my perspective view and drag through my timeline, I have them now moving in opposite directions. In order to create the repeating loop, though, I need to copy the first keyframe to frame 100. So I'll select both legs, and I'll shift and drag through the timeline, going over the keyframe for frame 1. I'll right click on it now and choose copy. Going to frame 100, I'll right click again and go to paste and click on the word paste. Now I've got one complete cycle, but it isn't looping. So once again, we'll go to the graph editor, and with both legs selected, I can now shift select the function for rotate X and go to curves, post infinity, and cycle. Now if I play my timeline, I should get a continual loop no matter how long the animation plays.